This is me. I've done keto for 33 days and decided to stop after doing blood tests. This video, I will explain why I decided to stop. I will also tell you how I felt, what I've learned in this entire journey. I think the conclusion, if it's too long a video for you to watch, the summary really is I think I'm not genetically cut out for it, but I am still an advocate for keto. Of course, before we begin, some disclaimers. I'm not a doctor. This is not any medical advice. Some are opinions, some are evidence-based facts. In the end, you should decide what's right or what's wrong. Feel free to debunk whatever I said if you find that there's something wrong or unfactual, but of course, please do so scientifically and academically. Before I start, I think I should really set something straight now. When I say keto, that means 70 to 75 of my calories come from fats. The thing that I find quite disturbing, at least in the Malaysian community, I'm not sure outside of Malaysia, is that a lot of people think keto is merely low carb and not high fat. Here's the thing, maybe in a way, let's go back to school a little bit. If you remember set theory, now what you're seeing on screen right now is the universe of all diets. Now in this circle is a set of low carb diets, and within this circle itself, there's another subset called the keto diet, which is both low carb and high in fat. Now if you're only doing low carb but not high in fat, which means your diet is probably primarily protein, that could be called an Atkins diet or a modified Atkins diet or just plain high protein or just a low carb diet. It's not exactly keto. I see a lot of people saying that keto is just low carb. I think it's bullshit. So if you are low carb and you're not very high in fats in terms of your diet, you are probably just consuming a lot of protein. Now that's actually I wouldn't say dangerous, but the thing is, when you have too much protein for your body, what your body will do is actually convert protein into glucose in a process called gluconeogenesis, which can kick you out of ketosis. It works for some people. Just a low carb diet doesn't matter whether you're eating a lot of fat or not. And I find it really disturbing because some people really do not know what they're talking about. I have in fact bought food, home cooked meals from this person who calls it keto meals, but to my surprise, it was mainly lean protein. It was super low carb, super low fat, and mainly just high in lean protein. So keto is 70 to 75% of your calories should come from fats. So I stopped keto after 33 days for two main reasons. One was because I just got married 2 days ago, and before that, obviously it was a bachelor weekend. The boys took me out and I had an unavoidable weekend of binging on alcohol, food and whatnot. So on that morning itself, I actually took a blood test because reason number two, my blood pressure was shooting up a little bit to the range of 140/90. My normal rate is normally 115/80, but I saw for a couple of days that it was hovering at about 140/90. So got my blood test result back, and of course the main concern was cholesterol. But let's first talk about cholesterol a little bit. A lot of people will look at that report, will look at LDL, the bad cholesterol, and say that if you have elevated LDL, that's not good for you. Now here's the thing, LDL is not necessarily bad, but it can be bad. LDL has a lot of good functions. People who have high LDL sometimes somehow have this capability to fight inflammation quite well, provided that your HDLs and your triglycerides are not out of whack. So even LDLs itself, there are good ones and bad ones. There are your oxidized LDL, your glycated LDL. I think that was what was happening to me. So let's check out my cholesterol profile for a minute here. LDL was up from 3.3 to 5.3 in just about a month. Triglyceride was up from 1.5 to 2.3. HDL actually fell from 1.4 to 1.22. Now The thing is, you cannot look at these numbers isolatedly. Let's look at trends. Now, when you're doing keto, here are the trends that you might expect if it's a good keto. You have to expect your HDL to go up, which was opposite for me. It went down. You want to expect glyceride to go down, but in my case, it actually went up. And LDL going up really doesn't matter that much. If you check out Dr. Paul Mason's lecture and of course his research, you want triglycerides to be less than 0.5. Mine was at bloody 2.3. You want HDLs to be more than 1.5. Mine was only at 1.2. And of course, quite importantly, the ratio of triglycerides to HDL should be less than 0.8. Mine was almost 2. So obviously what this last few ratios actually shows is that the kind of LDL that I had in my bloodstream was not exactly the great ones. The LDLs in my body was probably a lot of them was either glycated or oxidized, the kind that would sort of clog arteries. Of course, if you remember, I mentioned my blood pressure also went up to about 140 over 90. That is a cause of concern as well. My liver results, surprisingly, there was no increase in my fatty liver. There was no decrease either, but there was a slightly worrying stiffening of my liver. It's still in a very safe zone, but it stiffened a little bit. So question, of course, Ben, maybe your keto diet kind of sucked. And my answer would be maybe by design I kind of made it suck. This keto thing, it was not a rapid weight loss program for me at all. If keto actually worked out for me, I would want to do it for years. I would maybe want to do it forever. So how I designed the diet was for it to not be something that I would only do for 1 to 3 months. It had to be something that I would do for many, many years to come. A rough estimate would be I only meal prep about 1/3 of the time. The other 2/3 of the time was probably quite fairly split between Grab or eating out. So yes, it wasn't a very food prep kind of situation. If I were to follow, say, in the beginning, I did say I want to follow Dr. Josh X's protocol, which is a very clean keto. And I think if you want to do therapeutic keto to help maybe cure some diseases, that's what you should be following. It's all very healthy kind of fats like your salmon, your coconut oil, grass-fed beef and things like that. I even mentioned I wasn't going to eat pork, but I think it was unavoidable because I was trying to reach that target of fats. I think here's the more interesting part. In the intro I did mention I think I'm genetically not cut out for keto, and here is why. In 2019 I did a circle DNA test, and as it shows, I am pretty damn sensitive to fat, particularly saturated fat and salt. My family does have a history of cardiovascular diseases and hypertension, so I think that's what the circle DNA test results are showing. Maybe I just do not adapt very well with saturated fat that is common in the keto diet. So maybe you think that's bullshit, but I don't think, because here is an anecdote that my friend shared with me about her experience with keto diet. So my friend in Hong Kong and her with her husband actually started on a keto diet together at the same time. They of course pretty much ate the same food, but her husband was fine, but she found that maybe after 2 to 3 months they went back to the doctor and found out that her lipid readings, I'm not just saying cholesterol, but the same ratios, the HDL, the LDL and the triglycerides, looking at them together, her husband no problem, but she herself, the doctor said you should stop right now unless you want a stroke or a heart attack soon. I in general really love how it felt. Energy was great. Not in terms of the amount of energy or feeling very superhuman. It was more like how flatline the energy level was. You don't really get brain fog. Focus is pretty good. You don't really get your mid-afternoon crash. Sleep actually. There was no improvement nor deterioration as measured by both how I felt and by my watch. My watch actually measures this thing that's in my opinion quite important, is deep sleep continuity. A lot of watches give you the amount of deep sleep, light sleep, and REM, but what I like about my watch is it tells you for each episode of deep sleep how continuous and how long it was. Unfortunately, there was no improvement there. In terms of cravings, a lot of people would say that in a keto diet, because you eat a lot of fatty stuff, you will feel less cravings. There's also much less insulin response, so you don't get that hungry and full feeling a lot. And also because keto, you can metabolize. You can change from fat adipose tissues into ketones quite effectively, so you don't really feel hungry. But maybe it's just me, I don't know, or maybe my genes or my diet sucked, but that wasn't true for me. I still felt a lot of cravings. It's absolutely possible to live life without carbs, just that again, I'm not cut out for it genetically. You can still function well. Like I mentioned, energy and focus were all actually fantastic. It does cost more because what are your three main sources of macros? It's carbs, fats, and protein. If you remove carbs, which is the cheapest source of nutrition, obviously your diet is going to cost slightly more. Again, depends on where you are and what you plan to eat in your keto diet. You also have to be super mindful because you cannot exceed 20-30 grams of carbs if you're on a strict keto, not your bullshit low carb keto. Yes, so you have to be really mindful not to touch, things with sugar or very simple carbs or carbs in general. And snacks. Basically, snacks, junk food, there's very little of it, because if you walk down the snacks aisle in supermarkets, what do you see? Normally stuff made out of wheat, corn, and potato. None of those are keto friendly. Last but not least, again, I mentioned in the community, people doing keto, I think a lot of people actually don't quite know what they're talking about. Again, the thing is, as long as those diet actually works for them, that's fine, but sometimes it's quite misleading, especially when you sell keto stuff or when you advocate keto, but you're just doing the Atkins diet. I also wanted to mention, and I did bring this up in a keto group, that there's this company called Coco Lab, Malaysian brand of mostly coconut derivative products. They made this keto coffee, even calls it bulletproof coffee, but half of the content is actually, more than half of the content by weight is actually sugar. I did have a very brief exchange with, I think, one of the directors or business development or whatever. I actually made a video out of it, but I still haven't uploaded. She really doesn't know what she's talking about, and arrogantly, right at the end of the exchange, the message was, Ben, if you're against it, you don't have to take it. I was even shown a bloody old study with, 20-30 subjects. I can't even recall right now. That it was so ridiculous, and they claim that this is keto bulletproof coffee. To conclude, I am still an advocate for keto. It's just very unfortunate that genetically I'm quite sensitive to saturated fat and salt in general. Or salt, I forgot to mention why salt is because once you're low carb, your other source of electrolytes is salt, and because my family has a history of cardiovascular diseases and hypertension, it's just not very suitable for me. But I would definitely recommend it to anyone who would want to do keto. I think keto works especially well if you're trying to cure some diseases, or you're struggling with certain diseases like neurodegenerative diseases, maybe obesity, maybe even hyperthyroidism. Again, this is not medical advice. Please look up some evidence for that. Maybe talk to your doctor about it. And yes, but this is just a personal observation. Among people that I know that are active, keto doesn't really work well for them. You're talking about people who do weightlifting, bodybuilding, CrossFit, whatever. Generally, keto doesn't really work well for them. But people who come from an maybe obese or diabetic background, they tend to do a lot better with keto. I think also if you're coming from a really unhealthy lifestyle, keto might work. But again, please do a before and after blood test to really track how you're doing. What's next for me? I will be back to being a weekday pescatarian with intermittent fasting. But really this year, I can't wait to read a couple of books that I'll share on the screen right now to really learn more about other things that I could possibly try and perhaps recommend or not recommend to people.